Hello there, gang, and welcome to a brand new podcast here on ZyoriTV, The New Blocks, Episode 1, The Crypto Basics. Some of you might remember the old crypto podcast that we did over on the Moonduck channel. Myself and my good friend Josh, who still hangs out in the Discord every so often. He's moved on to other projects here, and we've decided to reboot the crypto love now with the recent hype surrounding it and also just all of the cool technology behind it. So, to do that, I got my buddy here, Kevin. We go back a long time. He's quite the programmer himself. He's way smarter than I am when it comes to technical stuff. I don't know about the street smarts, but when it comes to tech smarts, he's got it all. So I'm really excited to learn a little bit more about the tech side of crypto stuff, but also in a way that hopefully y'all can understand it. So welcome to episode 1, where we're going to get into some basic info. But Kevin, my man, how you doing?
Doing well. It's my first time doing any sort of, content production, so you'll have to bear with me. I think I appreciate having someone who's sort of knows their way around this field a bit because, I'll probably bring a little bit more of the kind of nerdy technical side, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to keep me balanced. Hopefully, the listeners won't fall asleep while they're listening to me, and we'll see how it goes.
Well, yeah, buddy. I mean, I've been around the block a couple times myself, but a different kind of block, I think. So today, we're going to talk about the digital side and plenty of layup jokes to be made as well. And, like some of the other content we're putting on the channel, the goal is to try to make these a little shorter, a little more pointed. Kevin here is a natural born project manager. We've gone on many a trips to PAX East together. He's organized the whole show. I've seen this man organize a 20-person trek, multiple state lines crossed to attend the Penny Arcade, 80,000 attendees, our little crew, a little spot to find somewhere to hang out. So I'm excited to dive into your brain about crypto, Kevin. So I guess first question, what got you into crypto, man? How did you fall down this rabbit hole of cryptocurrency?
That's a good question. For me, I got into, so I actually had a friend who told me about Bitcoin probably 2015 or so. And I think similar to many people sort of wrote it off immediately. It sounded kind of like nerd money that was never going to really become anything. Heard about it again later then in about mid 2017, sort of as the bull market was going and prices were kind of shooting up. Kind of got into it for all those reasons that many other people did, which is like, hey, this number go up, money's coming if you just throw in your bucks into Bitcoin. And sort of like as that market cycle happened through like beginning of 2018, prices crashed and most people kind of left and didn't really pay too much attention to it. And that was sort of where I just kind of continued reading about it, reading about Bitcoin and Ethereum, and kind of just fell down the rabbit hole from there. And it's been a hobby of mine now ever since. And yeah, just into learning about it, reading about it. And now I kind of understand a little bit more of the like why this is interesting part. Now, how about yourself?
Well, and it's so much information to digest. Like I remember spending multiple days over the span of probably a few months, sort of that first big run up to like 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. What was that, like 2017, something in there, like early 2017?
End of 2017.
End of 2017. Okay. That was when I really started taking notice and thinking, man, I should have invested a lot more in this. Now I'm investing little bits in this. And I remember thinking, am I wasting my time reading about this? Because it wasn't the kind of information that I could just read a white paper and then understand it and go, oh, that's really cool. Invest or not invest. It's like I have to Google a lot of the words along the way. I'm learning all this vocabulary. It's a very time-consuming hobby when you first start. So I think that's kind of what sucked me in. I'm a Dota player. I'm a Path of Exile player. I like challenging, punishing deep games. So crypto is, it's sort of a game in its own sort.
Yeah, and it's like that especially during that time frame, as prices were kind of going crazy, there really wasn't even like enough time between the point that most people kind of got into it and then the market crash. There wasn't really enough time to like actually understand what you were doing. Like I still I own some of the crypto that I bought back then that like has basically now been worthless. And like I didn't do the research that I should have done before buying some of those. But like now, I kind of going into it with this market cycle and kind of having learned about it a bit more,
Yeah.
I kind of realized how silly that was back then.
Well, still, I mean, that's part of being like an early adopter of anything.
Yeah.
There's some risk attached to it, and to some degree, you understand that. To some degree, maybe you don't entirely, but that is sort of how you learn. And there's a degree of FOMO, right? You don't want to be left behind. There's that old saying that the best time to buy cryptocurrency was yesterday. The second best time is today. I don't know if you've heard that before, but that's an old adage in the crypto world, right?
Yep. Yep.
So, to move along here, I guess one of the big questions that we wanted to pose today is why should I care about crypto? I think that's the first part of Crypto Basics for those of you tuning in that don't really understand any of the technical stuff. Maybe you don't understand a lot of the jargon. We're going to try to take you step by step and keep this one pretty macroscopic, I guess, so that you can understand the conceptual concepts about why this stuff is actually really cool. Why is Bitcoin more than just a stock, Kevin? Maybe that's a good way to frame it.
Yeah. And I mean, in all of the sort of thinking that I've done about this topic, I still find this question kind of hard to answer. I've come to the, I guess, like realization that this is sort of like the important question to answer first as you're getting into the space. I think a lot of, because of how technical it is, it can be easy to sort of like get lost in that side of it and not really care about the rest. Like it, when you start talking about like blockchains and like scaling solutions and like all of this other stuff that's going on without totally understanding like why any of this matters, you can kind of easily like kind of throw your hands up and give up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's something that you'll hear people also that are like kind of on both sides of the topic. You'll hear people like Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan Chase, talking about how like if you're stupid enough to buy it, you'll pay the price one day, and it's just not a real thing. Eventually, it'll be closed.
Yeah.
I know like Warren Buffett, also someone who kind of hates on crypto all the time. And
Yeah.
then on the flip side, you hear a lot of hype about it, right? Where it's like this is the next version of the internet, or this is like the future of money. And so I think it's because there are these like wildly opposing views. It can sort of be hard to kind of figure out like what is actually real in this space.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Let me pause for a second and say like, what about crypto has kind of, I don't know, like re-engaged you recently? Maybe aside from the price.
Well, so there's a little bit of an anarchist vibe to it in anything that's decentralized, right? This idea of shared ownership across a network, taking power away from a single institution. I didn't understand the term single point of failure for a long time. I was using it incorrectly. It's not about one person in a system failing. It's about that potential of one person being like a cog in the system, weighing it all down because everything has to run through that. So that's an issue that I think we face with money a little bit. I think almost everyone that I know has had a bad experience with banking or something financially related, and it takes a degree of knowledge that's surprisingly challenging to obtain to navigate that minefield. And it's interesting to me to see some of that financial institution get turned into a network that's not owned by any one person or government or anything else. And I think fundamentally that is one of the coolest aspects of this whole Bitcoin revolution. Where does that go? Where does that take us? I don't know. And all I can say is there are some folks that made some really wild predictions, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, with some big numbers. Who's like the McAfee guy. Remember him saying Bitcoin is 100,000 or a million or something like that?
Yep.
Wow, this guy's nuts. Now that we're pushing these crazy boundaries in terms of what Bitcoin's valued at, maybe that wasn't so crazy after all. 5 years from now, what's this thing going to be worth? Gets really interesting. So all of that is just fascinating. And this is a real life experiment. It's happening right now in real time in our lifetime. And I feel lucky to be able to witness that. So that's
I
All
think
very exciting.
yeah, and I think like it's also important to recognize that like I think any time that you sort of change the way that something is built at kind of a foundational level. So if we talk about like money is sort of the lifeblood of our economy and of our society, and anytime that you like change the properties of something that's that low level,
Mhm.
like you will inevitably kind of change all of the things around it. So if we're talking about like the technology that underpins sort of like economies and like business and like society and governing um, the internet, like making any sort of like low level tweaks or changes to that can have like some pretty massive transformational changes that come with it. I think for me, what I've come to realize is that people often um, kind of scoff at that idea because they anticipate that that sort of a change um, it should have either happened by now or it's never going to happen. Well, if
Mhm.
you think about the technology behind money, we've gone through like monetary revolutions in human history. Um,
Oh yeah.
and that's something that I want to talk about in our next podcast a little further. But like, um, to think that like the human race will have sort of like capped at like Venmo, and that'll just that's just going to be it for
We're
us
there. We've
from
reached the
now
pinnacle of
until
financial transactions. We're
right,
done.
exactly. I think
I mean, I'm lifetime. I'm banned from PayPal, so I mean, that's going to be real fun for me
right,
if they take over, and that's the financial future. And I don't know why.
yeah,
I just got a letter one day that said you're banned, and I
yep.
appealed, and they
You're
said
the only
sorry, we
one.
can't tell you because that's a security hole potentially. So you can't appeal again. See you later, there, bud. You can log in and look at your old balance.
Yep,
I
yeah,
I actually don't know. It's crazy. As far as I know,
and
it's a mistake.
I've heard that from plenty of people, and that's terrible. And it does sort of highlight, like, yeah, just the the structural sort of like design of the existing financial system. A lot of times, I'll call it the legacy financial system. I essentially refer to.
Wow, very edgy.
Um, I know, I'm cool. You'll find that over this podcast series. But I refer to that as sort of like the old way that things were done. So that applies to sort of like the banking system, sort of like financial institutions,
Mhm.
um, like the Fed and like kind of the money printer and the way that we like the whole machine that like creates fiat and sort of like everything that comes with that. Um,
Yeah.
like the legacy financial system is sort of like you were saying earlier about how it's built with these sort of like choke points that are centralized and allow for like a small number of actors to kind of like make decisions that affect
Mhm.
many people. And so like the general shift in the blockchain space and in the cryptocurrency space is to decentralize that and make it so that no one person in the network or in the entire system has more control than anyone else.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that's kind of the general shift that that we'll be digging into over the course of this podcast.
Yeah, exactly. I think when it to kind of like summarize TLDR, what makes Bitcoin or cryptocurrency cool is trust. If you had to summarize it in one word, it's a trust system. Somebody managed to create this network of digital fingerprinting and accountability that allows people to conduct financial transactions at a very, very accurate degree of specificity, right? Like it's a very
Yep.
predictable system if you use it correctly in terms of paying the fees and all this kind of stuff. But that's what makes it so cool is that you can do safe financial transactions without a bank holding the money in between. It's a network where nobody's holding it. The network just does it, and everyone else on the network holds everyone else accountable. That's a
Yeah.
really, really cool concept. That's like some Matrix shit, if I can put it in layman's terms, you know?
Yeah, it's
Um,
a shift. It's a shift from like trusting institutions, well, people, to trusting mathematics, like cryptography,
Hmm.
technology. Um, and it's not that I don't know, Jamie Dimon can't be trusted, or that like you and your bank like should have a bad relationship. I think a lot of times it's easy to kind of look at it from the like U.S. centric view of like we have the world's best financial system. Like
Yeah.
I trust my bank. Like it's not like they're gonna, I'm not gonna wake up tomorrow and they're gonna like not let me take my money out. Hopefully, right? But it's sort of important to take a step back and kind of remember that like we living in the United States have the luxury of sort of like that of having that trust, and sort of like it's kind of easy to take that for granted. But
Yeah.
also the by transitioning from trusting in people and institutions to trusting in the laws of math, we can do new things with that, right? Like you can create new mechanisms of finance and like program money
Hmm.
in a way that you couldn't do when we were doing everything through like centralized
Yeah.
intermediaries.
Well, and one aspect as well, without going too deep or getting too conspiratorial, I wonder like how much debt is too much, right? That there's a certain point in our current financial system where everyone knows that we're sort of just making up numbers now, right? We're not attached to gold. It's not pegged to anything. The however, what was it, 20 trillion, 30 trillion, whatever the US is in debt, this global economy, it's all just numbers relative to other numbers that at this point are made up is a little disingenuous. That's like too reductionist, but they have an arbitrary nature where it's not really pegged to anything. And it does make you wonder what happens when some of these numbers become so gigantic. What happens when the interest payment on the debt is so big that we can't even afford to make that as a country? That's when things get real hinky. You can't just keep printing money forever, because then you have to deal with inflation and devaluing of your currency relative to the other currencies, because everything you said also kind of applies to the euro. That's another very globally accepted currency that is very easy to use and is highly valued and highly stable as well. But that might not be the case for South America, for example. Like Venezuela is that glowing example of Bitcoin is more stable than their currency, or at least it was for a good stretch there. That could be the case for other places in the world, depending on how this global institution holds up to our, increasingly digital and scalable and just completely different economy. A lot of this stuff is unprecedented, man. Like I said, harkening back to the living in the live experiment, whether you want to be or not, it's kind of happening all around you. So I'd rather try to at least understand a piece of it if I can, right?
Yeah, it's also important to remember that we're like also living in both the Bitcoin experiment and the like money printer experiment.
Yes.
Like everything that's happening right now post COVID has never happened before. And I think it's easy for a lot of the like heavy crypto, like hardcore Bitcoin followers to sort of like scoff at the money printer, or sort of just um, like not it's important to recognize that like the money printer, I should maybe define that. I'm referring to the idea that like, we can just like print as much money
Yeah,
as we want.
the
And like you
Federal
said, the
Reserve.
numbers don't matter.
So like this, we're about to do a 1.9 trillion dollar package or whatever that Biden's been talking about.
Yeah.
Where does that money come from? Essentially, we just print it. We just make it. We have the ability to make
Yeah.
money, and we do it all the time to pay for stuff. So
Yeah. And so like given the structure of the existing financial system, like the money printer route like makes sense given that architecture. But like
yes,
I think what something like Bitcoin and kind of the greater crypto space offers is an alternative and kind of a way to structure a financial system where there is no option for a money printer. Like
hmm,
we sort of already have option A, which is like the entire fiat system. Fiat referring to like any government-backed currency.
yeah,
Um,
just money basically. Yeah,
yeah,
like
money, pretty
tangible
much all
money.
money prior to crypto.
Yeah,
And now with crypto, we sort of have the ability to like run as many money experiments as we want in parallel to that existing financial system.
yeah.
So yeah, I think we're sort of like we're in a lot of experiments right now, and I think it's important to kind of understand which ones, have which impact, and potentially
Yeah.
like which one may hedge against another one.
Yeah. So I guess one of the things we want to keep encouraging here is that like your crypto and blockchain quest is a journey, right? You're not going to understand it in one podcast or even like 5 podcasts. You need to read a couple things, need to listen to a couple different perspectives, and it takes a while to really digest all of it and sift through all of the noise out there. And Lord knows that there's a lot of it. So our goal is to try to help navigate a little bit, but don't be too hard on yourself if it feels overly technical at times, because it kind of is. And I guess sometimes that's how innovation goes, right? I mean, this is truly new stuff, so it's not something you would have learned in school or university. This is the stuff that people are actively just learning and developing right now. So it also changes quickly. So who knows? Maybe we'll have to come back and revisit this in 5 years and go, wow, how crazy, man. Things have changed so much, even with this basic, broad level stuff. To kind of get closer to the end here, we'll probably be a little shorter in the future, but episode 1, there's a lot to go over here. We've got some lightning round questions. So this is just going to be some quick kind of question and answer, and I think these are some good basic FAQ questions that I've seen a lot talking to folks about crypto. So here we go. Kevin, where should I buy crypto?
That's a great question, Andrew, and it's a question that I get a lot. Yeah, so you have a lot of different options. I think most recently we've been seeing a lot of headlines for companies like Venmo and PayPal that are going to begin allowing buying and selling. Robinhood last year or so. So we're going to probably do an entire episode about sort of the different like ways that you can buy crypto.
Yeah.
The one thing I would hit
Exchanges.
on though, what that?
Exchanges. Yep.
Yes, yeah, cryptocurrency exchanges. So the one thing that's worth hitting on maybe in this episode is just knowing that like all exchanges aren't created equally, and so one thing that you can do with crypto that is sort of important is not only just exchange your US dollar into something like Bitcoin or Ether, but be able to withdraw that and actually take custody of that, of like the physical Bitcoin. And a lot of these newer, more kind of noob-friendly kind of Robinhoods and probably Venmos and PayPals don't allow you to withdraw your crypto. And even if that doesn't seem interesting to you at first, I would encourage you to look toward other exchanges that do allow that, because I even have a friend who recently had to sell. He had bought some when Robinhood first announced having crypto support, and bought everything through Robinhood. And then now he wants to kind of withdraw it. So of course he has to sell everything on Robinhood, go over
So
to
do we
another
have
one.
examples? Can we name specifics here?
Yeah, so the biggest in the United States is Coinbase. They have both kind of a noob-friendly Coinbase and then Coinbase Pro, which has like cheaper fees.
So kind of a
That's a
stock
good one.
trader interface sort of thing.
Yep. And then the other popular ones are like Gemini, Kraken. I think more globally, Binance is probably the largest. There's a lot of others, but yeah, I would say you can't really go wrong with those. Maybe it's worth doing a little bit of research and seeing sort of like what fees are relevant for where you live and what exchanges you have access to.
Check out tax implications too. Most countries have some sort of tax law as well. So worth noting before you buy. Might be different than stocks as well. It's not as simple as capital gains necessarily. Really varies depending on where you are. Okay, so next question. Which ones should I buy? There's Bitcoins, there's Ethereums, there's Litecoins, there's all these, there's these dog coins. How do I know? Should I get the dog ones? I saw the Trump coins.
So here's my thought. So over the course of this podcast, we're going to discuss our own opinions on crypto and blockchain. And overall, like none of this is financial advice. These are sort of our own opinions. So do your own research. I think over this series, we're going to be talking about particular ones that like will sort of give you kind of an understanding of the space. But this is definitely the sort of field where you should really understand what you're buying before you buy it.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna not answer.
Okay, all right, a little slight. That's fair though. We're too early to recommend a specific coin to buy, but yeah. So, what do we have here? Kind of a follow up. Why are there so many different cryptocurrencies? Do we need so many different types of bitcoins?
Yeah. So I think one thing that a lot of newcomers to the space sort of assume is that because these cryptocurrencies are supposed to be kind of monies, that everything is sort of like competing with the dollar. That everything, like the goal is that you should be able to buy your coffee with like XYZ coin. It's important to recognize that that's not the case, and that's not necessarily the goal. Um, there are a lot of different attributes for money, and there are also a lot of different current cryptocurrencies that look and act nothing like money. It's also like important to recognize that this is still super early. We're kind of in the Wild West here, and a lot of these are experiments. Typically, a lot of cryptocurrencies come from projects where they'll use their cryptocurrency for fundraising, for sort of like financial service protocols, kind of crowdsourced decision making, voting, ownership of real world assets. So I think it's sort of a complicated. Kind of a complicated answer, but I think the takeaway here is like think of this closer to kind of the .com bubble era where
Okay.
there was just kind of a lot that happened all at once. And I mean, we kind of saw that in 2017, 2018, where the price shot up. There was a million projects, and then they all kind of
The
like crashed.
ICOs. Yes.
The ICOs, yep, the
Yes.
initial coin offerings. So
Yes.
similarly, I won't be surprised if we sort of have another one of those kind of hype cycles. It seems as though we're kind of in the beginning of the next one. And so I think just like be wary that there are also scams
Well,
within the space.
it's and I mean to draw that .com parallel, it reminds me of when we were kids in middle school and we had to write papers and we were starting to use the internet, and our teachers would say, "Remember, anybody can make a website. You can't use it as a source unless it's like a government website or from a scholarly journal or like a book that is online or something that's a real source. It can't just be turtles.com that somebody was smart enough to buy and then start a blog about turtles with a bunch of misinformation." That's sort of the amazing and just natural evolution of something that's open and decentralized. The internet is very much like that. Anyone can make a website. Anybody can make a coin if they want to. That doesn't necessarily mean that that coin has a good utility or a specific purpose or any sense of longevity. So I think that's maybe a good TLDR version of why there are so many, because anybody can make it. So there you go. That's why the first mover really had a big advantage in this regard.
Yep. So Andrew, I'm going to turn this around and ask you a couple questions.
Okay, what do you got?
One that I've received from time to time: do I need to buy a full Bitcoin?
This
in
is
order to
a great one,
purchase?
and no, you don't. The great thing about Bitcoin is, it's very math based, right? It's not a physical asset; it's a digital one. So you can break it down into any denomination that you want. You can buy half of a Bitcoin, you can buy a tenth of a Bitcoin, you can buy 100th, you can even buy 1,000th of a Bitcoin. It's totally cool. It basically scales down forever, right? Doesn't it just keep on
Well, it
going?
scales down to the smallest denomination on the Bitcoin network is called the Satoshi. I think it's
Okay.
one with 8 zeros. However, because of some additional like layers to the network, like the Lightning Network, uh, you can actually denominate it further. So there's a little bit of wiggle
Okay.
room there.
In the future, we'll find ways to
Roughly,
break it down
yeah,
further. I'm for it. But
exactly.
essentially, no. That's one of the cool sort of scaling aspects of it as a currency. Even once we mine up all the Bitcoins, there's still going to be other aspects to it.
And speaking of mining the Bitcoins, Andrew, what does it mean to mine Bitcoin?
So not exactly what people picture. It's really a great analogy because, we've got the Wild West of the gold rush where you were in the mines physically mining ore out of the earth's crust and then turning it into precious metal. That's a great visualization, but not exactly what's happening. Mining refers to a type of computer. It's a specific piece of hardware that solves this algorithm that produces new Bitcoins. And this happens in a digital manner. So it creates new Bitcoins on the network, and those coins get distributed to people that contribute to the computing power that helps mine them. So it's digital mining. It's really a great turn of phrase, but has nothing to do with sort of discovering in that regard. It is a good analogy, though, in the sense that there is a finite supply. So sometime in our lifetime, it will happen that all of the Bitcoins will be mined up, which means there will be no more supply, and it'll just be existing Bitcoins moving around on the network, which is sort of fascinating to think about from like a financial experiment standpoint
I think
as
it's
well.
about the last Bitcoin will be mined. I forget what year. I think it's about 100 years from now.
Oh,
So
really? All right, so not our lifetime.
maybe
Okay.
maybe we're just being optimistic.
I guess I assume that computing
healthcare will
power.
improve, I'm sure.
Well, computing power is going to be going up like even faster than we think it will because it accelerates at these crazy breakpoints.
Yeah,
So
and also we'll kind of get
I don't
into
know.
more of a description of mining as well. I think we're
Yeah.
gonna have an episode between here and our Bitcoin specific episode. But
Yeah.
yeah,
So
I'm looking forward
did
to
I
talking
hit
about
that
that.
right though? Any notes?
Yeah,
Did I
yeah,
snipe it?
you did pretty well.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I mean the other thing that the you sort of mentioned this, but like the sort of gold meme that like Bitcoin is like digital gold. I think that's sort of another thing that lends well to the idea of mining. It- just the idea of sort of a deflationary asset that kind of like gets rarer and rarer over time and
Yeah.
harder and harder to mine, essentially. But
Yeah. It's not a bad analogy, but it's
yeah,
definitely
it's
not
not
exactly
not apples
one
and
to one.
oranges.
2D and 3D don't exactly translate one to one. There's a process that
Yeah.
has to happen in between. But okay, buddy. Well, I think that takes us to a wrap. This was a great first episode. I appreciate you. We're going to be doing this weekly. We've got a good like 20 episodes, something like that, outlined and somewhat planned. So I think we've got a whole lot to go, a lot of steps down the rabbit hole. Next episode, going to be talking about money, some conventional concepts, and also some futuristic concepts, and really dive deep into fiat currency versus cryptocurrency. Kev, anything else? Any plugs or anything you want to close this first one out with?
No, I mean I think this was a solid first episode, and I look forward to talking about crypto and blockchain and kind of falling down this rabbit hole with you. So yeah, it's been a pleasure.
All right. I'm down as long as we can hold hands, buddy. I'm scared.
We'll hold hands through the
All
camera.
right. Digital hand holding. That's true. COVID times. God damn it. Oh, man. It always goes back to that. All right. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks a lot.
See ya.